Topic 13, migration. There are a lot of migration models. Right? Here we only choose a few: Ravenstein, gravity model, Stoffer, and Lee theory of migration. Because if you Google and you notice that there are much more migration models than these few. Okay. First, we have the definition of migration. Migration, in this case, a Cambridge dictionary will define as a process of people traveling to a new place to live, usually in a large number. Okay? So your different people got different definition. So for the another Webster definition will be migration is to move from one country, place, or locality to another. Okay? Of course, in a more common term, migration you will have move from one state to another state, one city from another city within a country, or you change the country altogether. In the context of globalization, migration refers to human movement across country or between continents, whether for the purpose of employment, refugees, exile, colonization, or other things, right? Thus, migration is actually seen as a form of human globalization. Okay? There are many different conceptualization of migration. Right? So, from regional migration is a migration within the same continent, right? And here we start with first model of migration, Ravenstein. Okay? Ravenstein was born in Frankfurt, 1937, England, and his migration model is basically some principle or rules, right? That's why it's called known as the law of Ravenstein model, or it's just basically a principle of rule. So this step of generalization of Ravenstein law of migration is as follows. Okay. What is a principle, rules, or so-called law of migration according to Ravenstein? First, majority of migrants go only a short distance. Hence, has an inverse relationship between distance and volume of migration. This number one, distance and volume actually similar, or he has inspiration from the gravity model, which will come back later on. I mean, in another meaning, usually people will go to a short distance. For example, if you are staying in maybe Rawang or Batang Kali, then you migrate to KL City or Cheras there to work short distance, right? Rather than you go to long distance. Or you see Malaysian actually more tend to migrate to Singapore rather than Australia, because Singapore are nearer, easy to access. Right? Migration process step by step, or step by step. He wrote that the inhabitants of the country immediately surrounding a town of rapid growth flock to it. The gap left in the rural population are filled by the migrants from the more remote district until the attraction force of one of our rapidly growing city made its influence felt step by step to the most remote corner of the kingdom. Or in a more practical term, for example, maybe people in Johor Bahru migrate to a more bigger city in Singapore, but then surrounding the Johor Bahru, you have this style of Muar, right? Not so developed compared to Johor Bahru, and Johor Bahru not so developed compared to Singapore. So the Muar town will migrate to Johor Bahru. Then in the Muar town, you have some of the very even more remote, like Jawa Tengah, right? All this Pare. So they are migrate to Muar, and then in this case, you see the less developed or more remote district migrate to a more developed country. So one step by one step. It's not for this model is like that. Migrant going long distance generally go by preference to one of the great center of commerce or industry. So if they travel long distance, right, they usually go to some preference also. For example, I think for Malaysian, mostly they will travel to if you longer distance than Singapore, they will travel to Australia, New Zealand, like Japan. So maybe even more further, Canada, there are some preference. Every migrant current produce a counter current. This number 4 usually attract a lot of criticism. Mean that every migrant current produce a counter current. For example, if let's say 20 people from Malaysia migrate to Singapore, or let's say 20 people from KL migrate to Singapore, then you expected another 20 people from other place go back to KL, or there may be some people from Singapore migrate back to KL. So let's say from A to B, or 20 people from A to B, this law actually claim that they may be 15 from C to B, then go back or I mean there is a counter back. But so far we sometimes see that migration biasly to one flow rather than two flow. Right? The native of town or city are less migratory than those who are rural areas. So city, because they have a lot of the opportunity, especially economic sense, and they are less migratory than rural area. Female are more migratory than male within the kingdom, maybe within the country, but male are more frequently venture beyond. Most migrants are adults, right? Family migrate out of their country above. Large town grow more by migration than natural increase. So, you can see Singapore, they are growing more by migrant rather than they are born above due to a birth rate or their natural increase. Migration increase in volume as industry and commerce develop and transport improve. Of course, most in a logical sense or common sense, people migrate because of economics factor like industry and job, you have higher pay job, better job, right? And then if transportation improve, then you can migrate more. The major direction of migration is from agriculture to the center of industry and commerce. The major cause of migration are economics, right? Very common is because of economic job, money, higher pay, rather than other things like you like the cultural day or you like the scenery day. So these are the few so-called law of migration, which actually some rules or principle or some generalization on the factor affecting the migration or the migration trend. Based on Ravenstein. Another one will be more empirical things, or you can have a formula will be a gravity model. Right? For the word gravity, you know the role or the importance of geographical or distance, right? So the way distance has been the most important determinant of migration. In many models also you will see geographic distance. For example, if you are born in, let's say, Sungai Long, right? A tendency for you to migrate or your chosen destination to migrate, most likely you will choose a nearer distance than a further distance. Like for example, if between Singapore and New Zealand, you prefer to choose Singapore, right? Than New Zealand because far away. Or you stay in Perak, Ipoh, the tendency for you to choose to migrate to Penang and KL is more than to migrate to maybe England, right? So you see, for example, more Malaysian migrate to neighboring country Singapore other than a further distance like Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. Thus, the gravity model is an extension of the typical model based on distance. Right? This model considers number of migrants between population as a function of geographical distance and the population size, right, of the recipient and source. So you can quantify this migration model as in this one, I equals to K, which is a constant, and then N B. And I mean the population in the original place, J in the destination. So when migration between population I and J, I is a proportion of product of masses of NJ. Product mean times that of the masses mean population, and inversely proportionate square to the distance D between the population. That means if the distance longer and longer, right? -2 mean divide by D to the power of 2. So when the D is longer and longer and bigger, then the migration flow, the I is less and less, right? Like for example, 1/10, 1/100, 1/1000, 1/1,000,000, right? So 1/1,000,000, of course, is smaller than 1/100. There are subsequent model where power of distance, in this case, D is not fixed to 2, but can be changed, right? Subsequent model, of course, you can improve the model, or you have a new idea, or you have a some criticism and you adjust, right? The theoretical principle of gravity model is twofold, right? From here, you'll know that one is the population masses, and second is the distance, right? So, the degree of interaction is directly proportional to the size of the masses, and second, the degree of interaction is indirectly proportional to the distance that separate them. Indirectly usually equal to 1 divided by, because d to the power of -2 means divided by d to the power of 2. Right? Note that Ravenstein later also applied this principle. Then the basic model has been criticized on relying too much on a simple analogy. You can see this model is very simple, based on two variable only, or two common thing only, where it's the masses and then the distance. Right? However, extension of the model had been delivered later on. That means they will try to add on more detail and add on another factor, right? Including Ravenstein, like this one we mentioned, yeah, they apply other principle, other law, other pattern or trend of migration based on the gravity model, right? Some of the common or popular add-on or improvement on the gravity model, right? Improvement from the original gravity model is just like that. So some of the improvement, of course, some will say that it's not -2, it is hardest number. But besides that, some of the improvement will be these few: original specific, extension specific, and network or potential model. Original specific mean that one place of origin to several destination. That means from A to B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, B6, B7, B8, B9, B10, right? Destination specific mean flow that are predicted from several origin to one destination. So from A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, A6 to B1 or to B. So from different origin, right? And the gravity model was later reformulated to account for network of interaction between the places known as the potential model developed by this one. So you have different thing. So you add on that distance that separate the IJ result potential model show positive each predictive. So you just add on different things to this model, right? Maybe you'll find it this one also. Stoffer theory of mobility. Another theory with Stoffer theory of mobility is related also, or you notice that it's similar also to the gravity model, the original gravity model, which masses and distance. Here, you notice that Stoffer argued that distance, even though it's important, but there are another factor which called intervening opportunity. Right? And he operationalized the concept and successfully tested the proposition that intervening opportunity are the significant obstruction and geography mobility. What does this mean? In the common term, in that, for example, if you are stay in Sungalong, right? You want to migrate to Singapore. The distance between Sungalong and Singapore, let's say, is J, right? It's a J. So if you draw a circle, right, between Sungalong and Singapore, around circle, or even though from the distance between Sungalong to Singapore, you have some intervening opportunity, like for example, Johor Bahru or other thing. Or more practical thing is, let's say you stay in Kampar, Perak, you plan to migrate to Singapore, but between Kampar, Perak to Singapore, the distance, you may go through Ipoh, you might choose Ipoh instead of Singapore, which is nearer, or you may choose Penang, or you may choose Kuala Lumpur, or you may choose Johor Bahru, or you may choose Malacca. So in between the origin and destination, there are many others opportunity to be within a circle centered at I with the radius equal to the distance of between I and J, right? So between, let's say Kampar to Singapore, you got a lot of other opportunity, right? So therefore, the longer the distance, we assume commonly is you have a more opportunity cost or more intervening opportunity, right? And it is this intervening opportunity that determine whether you want to migrate, you still want to migrate to Singapore or not, right? So it's not only the distance, but it's the opportunity within the distance that is important determination of migration based on this Stoffer theory, right? So thus, the observed decline in the volume of migration is due to an increase in the number of intervening opportunity, right? That with increasing distance, right? Not that increasing distance alone in the gravity model. So the gravity model only focus on increasing distance alone, but Stoffer model claim that not only increasing distance, because increasing distance, if it increase this distance, you got more opportunity, then this you may end up not in Singapore, for example. Just now you're from Kampar, you're not end up in Singapore, but you end up in KL, or you end up in Penang because shorter distance, or you may end up in Johor Bahru, right? So intervening opportunity. So mathematically, you can express in like that, y equals to change in x X before X1, X2 also can, right? So what is expected number of migration? The top one, the triangle X is number of opportunity in the destination, and X is a number of intervening opportunity. That means the number of X, the below X is a number of opportunity within the distance between the original and the destination, and K is a constant. So from here, you know, if the denominator is higher, the X is bigger, number is bigger, like for example, 2/10, 2/100, 2/1000, 2/10,000, 2/1,000,000. So the bigger the X, the smaller the Y. Stoffer modified his theory of migration and intervening opportunity in the mid-1950 and add the concept of competing migrant to his model. So later on, he modified his own model, then add a competing migrant. You know, so his modified theory of mobility will become here. The revised model proposed that during a given time interval, the number of migrants from city 1 to city 2 is a direct function of number of opportunity in city 2, right? The first X here, and the inverse function of number of opportunity intervening between city 1 and city 2. So the second X here, and the number of other migrants for the opportunity in city 2. So you add another X, the third X here. So we have X1 or XB and XC, right? Then later on, he introduced another one that is the push factor or disadvantage factor, then the X0. So we have 4X here. So in short, the determinant of migration depend on the number of opportunity, let's say from Kampar to Singapore, the number of opportunity in Singapore, the number of opportunity between Kampar to Singapore, not only direct between Kampar to Singapore, is the number of opportunity between the radius of the distance between Kampar and Singapore. In this case, it might include Penang, Ipoh, right? Then the number of competing migrants in Singapore, maybe too many people already in Singapore. So if you go to migrate there, you might hard to get a job. So in this case, it's the indirect effect. I mean, that more people already move to Singapore, then you might try to think that it's not so suitable or for you. Another one with the push factor, maybe Kampar got a lot of things that you don't like, right? More and more of things you don't like, maybe more pollution, more noisy, then so will push you out further, or something bad memory happened in Kampar, you don't want to stay at that place anymore. So the more of this X0, then the higher of the chances of migration. So they expand the model. The expression into may be related as a function of the numerator. So if X0 and X1 you join together, you can combine as M, right? Therefore, you put power of it, then you can convert it into a linear equation where research can be done based on empirical research can be done if you have a data on this XC, XB, XM, right? Log K is a constant, therefore you do a normal regression with a constant, then the constant number will represent X. K, and the coefficient for factor XM, B is a coefficient for factor XB, C a coefficient for factor XC. So this one you can do a regression model or empirical model to prove it. One of the main problem of regression theory is that this aggregation, even though you add on more detail on this one, but there is actually an aggregated theory. Why? Because the migration, for here you see they don't consider different type of migrant. The path of distribution of blue-collar worker within a nation obviously different the path of retired person, student, military personnel, executive, or so forth. I mean, this migration model for blue-collar worker and white-collar worker, for retired person, for student, or for other people, right, is different, right? So, but if you want to do a research on this model, you're going to aggregate them. You assume they have a state, they are the same, right? So the problem of disaggregation. Another model of migration you learn is the Lee theory of migration. Of course, Lee theory of migration, they don't have a specific like numerical model, right, or empirical model, but more on Lee provide a lot of like condition or factor that help to explain why migration happen and how it happened and so on, right? So Lee broadly defined migration as a permanent or semi-permanent change of residence. No restriction is placed upon the distance of the move or upon the voluntary, involuntary nature of the act, and no distinction is made between external and internal migration. So he therefore highlight that a move across the hall from one apartment to another is counted as just as much act of migration as a move from bed to bed. That means just a movement anyway is considered as migration. Right? But anyway, trying to see how he theoreticized the migration or the factor that caused the migration. Okay, first factor in the act of migration. The factor enter the decision to migrate and the process of migration may be summarized under the four heading. So what actually caused the migration? Factor associated with the area of origin. Right? So how to say? If you think back a scenario that we do just now, like you are staying or born in your hometown in Kampar, Perak, right? You plan to migrate to Singapore. So factor associated with the origin means factor associated with the Perak. Maybe less job occupation, or maybe you study, let's say rocket science, you have a degree of master or PhD in rocket science. Kampar don't have a job of rocket science for you, right? Or maybe Kampar is a noisy town, example, is polluted town, right? Or maybe Kampar, you have a friend or family, right? Or girlfriend, boyfriend in Kampar, so attract you there. So any factor associated with the area of origin. Of course, another will be factor associated with the area of destination. When Singapore can offer you the job that you want with higher salary and then a big city lifestyle, right? Or maybe you think Singapore will give you more facility in terms of health, entertainment, also many, or some of the push and pull factor also, like maybe you think Singapore working is very stressed, right? You don't have friends, you may think you will have loneliness in Singapore, you migrate, so a lot of factors associated with the area. Then of course you got this called intervening obstacle, like in the Stockholm model, in between Kampar town and Singapore town, we still have a lot of opportunity or other choices. For example, you may drop off in work at the end, you work in KL or you work in Johor Bahru, you work in Penang, right? And then of course, personal factor, right? Personal factor is very subjective, right? For example, you like Singapore so much, right? Don't know why you just like Singapore, but your friend may don't like, hate Singapore so much, don't know what reason, you just don't like the Singapore, right? So personal factor, right? In every area, there are countless of factors that hold people in the area to attract people. That means the pull factor, right? Just now, maybe your family still in the hometown, right? Your boyfriend or girlfriend in the hometown, or you love your hometown a lot, right? Or pull factor or push factor, maybe opportunity is no good, the hometown getting worse, right? Pull factor, of course, also apply to destination area. For example, in Singapore, you can earn the salary maybe 5 times higher than if you stay and find a job in your hometown in Kampar, right? So pull factor from the destination, right? Then of course there are other people which actually indifferent or neutral. Region area, net migration in any area is a net result of the interplay between this factor. It's a pull and push factor, right? We see, right, some of these factors affect people in much more the same way, like for the good or bad weather. I think if you are fans of English Premier League, you'll notice that some club, like for example in Manchester United, Manchester City, people really don't like to go there because the weather is not so good, right? Compared to team like Tottenham, Hotspur, I think those London, Chelsea, they are London-based club, right? Or Paris and Germain, the city is so nice, right? So, but they are also in different way. For example, you may not want to move to a place where you got a school because you may have a traffic jam, right? Noisy. But if you have young children, you may want to move there because it's easy to send your children, just walking distance, right? So different personal factor. The balance effect of the move must be enough to overcome the natural inertia in which always exists, right? Inertia, you study the Newton law, mean that if you already born and stay in Kampar, for example, in your hometown, you stay there for 20 to 20 years, right? It's very hard for you to move on, right? You may have some degree of attachment there. So you need the balance will be in favor of strong enough to overcome this natural inertia. Of course, personal factor, as I mentioned before, some factor that may be good or attractive to one person may not be good for another person, like school, right? If you are single, right, you will not want to or have a school move to a place where you have a school nearby, or you are elderly, you not want to move to a school near traffic jam. Right? If you have a children, then you want to move to a school nearby because it's very convenient for you. Right? The factor. Okay. Next, volume of migration. With regard to the volume of migration, we propose the following set of hypotheses. Hypothesis means you can test, right? In this test whether correct or not. So these are 6. The volume of migration within a given territory varies with the degree of diversity of the area included in the territory. The volume of migration varies or different with the diversity of people, where there's a great sameness of people, whether in terms of race, ethnic group, education, income, tradition, may be expected a lesser rate of migrant. We may expect a lesser rate of migration than there is a great diversity. The volume of migration related to difficulty of surmounting intervening obstacle. Again, intervening obstacle, volume of migration vary the fluctuation of the economy. Right? For example, if let's say Malaysia currency drop drastically for the last few years, then you expected that more Malaysian will migrate to Singapore. Right? But then several checks are imposed. Both volume and rate of migration tend to increase over time. Right? Like let's say one place, let's say you're from Gambia, you want to migrate to Singapore. If there's no check, I mean, you might later on encourage your friend or to migrate, or your friend see that while you migrate to Singapore, you earn five times salary, you come back with a very nice clothes, you come back like a rich person, so they attract more and more over time. Rate and volume of migration may vary with the state of progress in the country or the area. Stream and counter stream. With respect to the development stream or the counter stream of migration, Lee suggests the following hypothesis. Migration tend to take place largely within a well-defined stream. So if you take back migration, overall migration between Malaysia and Singapore, regardless of whether you're from Kampong or KL or Johor Bahru, mostly on Johor Bahru, right? You see, largely well-defined stream. So Malaysia people mostly they migrate to Singapore because it's like so-called like a more popular choice, like a well-defined stream, rather than they migrate to other places like Denmark, right? France, right? It's not so popular, right? Of course, intervening factor and distance play a role. So for every major migration stream, a counter stream develop, right? So this one also similar with just now fee-based theory, but of course always being criticized, right? Like Malaysia migrate to Singapore, you don't expect that maybe Singapore migrate to Malaysia, right? Or those Malaysia already work in Singapore, now they want to retire and they come back to Malaysia, or other country like Indonesia or other country that migrate to Malaysia. So there's a counter stream. The efficiency of a stream measured in terms of ratio between stream and counter stream. The net distribution population affect the opposite flow is high if negative factor at the place of origin were more prominent in the developed stream. So more negative factor, you will get higher migration. The efficiency of stream or counter stream tend to be low if origin destination are similar, right? So if let's say one day ringgit Malaysia and Singapore dollar is about the same, right? Malaysia is as developed as Singapore, so they expected the migration between these two countries actually is the same. Right? So, for example, between Cheras and or somewhere near, really two towns as the same, then you will get less migration. Okay? The efficiency of migration stream will be high if the intervening factor of factor are great, right? The efficiency of migration stream varies with economic condition, right? Being high in prosperous time and low in migration. So economic condition always a very important factor of migration. Okay. Then the theory also covers characteristic of migrant, right? I mean, he tried to generalize what is the characteristic of the migrant. For example, migration is selective in nature. Migration, not everybody want to migrate. Right? Migration responding primarily to plus factor at the destination tend to be positively related. Migrant responding to negative factor at the origin tend to be negatively related. Okay, what do you mean? Migrant responding to plus factor at the destination tend to be positively related. For example, if you migrate to Singapore, because you think Singapore offer higher salary, better job prospect, so positively selected, then those migrant, because of this one, usually is educated, right? Skilled worker, right? So tend to be positively selected. Migrant is going to negative factor. For example, some migrant go to other country because of war, then not enough job, some that conflict there. So those are refugees, those migrants, you say that it's negatively more tend to be negatively selected. Right? Taking all migrant together, selection tend to be by model. Major positive selection increase with the difficulty of intervening obstacle. I mean, if you are from Kampar, right, you want to migrate to Singapore, so if there are a lot intervening obstacle, you still move there. That means maybe you really are a very genius, talented people. Whole Malaysia, including Kuala Lumpur, don't have enough company to pay you or hire you. So you will be eager positive selection. You will go to Singapore because Singapore has, let's say you study nuclear science. No, Singapore you only have or something, or Australia only you have. Right? The heightened propensity to migrate at certain stage of life is important in the selection of migrant, right? Of course, you see the migrant usually will be youngster, those are graduate, like for example, maybe after your graduate, you get a degree, you want to migrate to Singapore, you will see less people migrate when you are 40 years old, 7 years old, unless you migrate together with your family, or less migration at 50 years old or 45 years old. So tend to be a stage of life cycle. Maybe 50 years old, 60 years old, then you may have a counter stream migration. Let's say you migrate when you are 20s, you go to Singapore. When you are 60, you want to retire, then you come back to Malaysia. The characteristic of migrant tend to be intermediate between characteristic of population and the place of origin of population. So all these are the theory of migration.